The morning mist clung to the dense forest floor like a ghostly blanket as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her rifle scope for the third time in 10 minutes. Her breathing was steady, controlled, each exhale measured and deliberate. From her concealed position on the rocky outcrop overlooking the valley, she had a clear view of the insertion point where SEAL Team 7 will be making their approach in less than 2 hours. Maria had been in position since 0300 hours, long before dawn broke over the mountainous terrain of eastern Afghanistan. The mission briefing had been clear, but troubling. Intelligence suggested that a high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks on coalition forces, was holed up in a compound 3 kilometers deeper into the forest. What made this operation particularly dangerous was the recent chatter intercepted by NSA analysts indicating that the enemy knew American forces were coming. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions, a maze of towering pine trees, rocky outcroppings, and narrow valleys that had sheltered insurgents for decades. Maria knew this terrain well. She had spent the last 18 months conducting surveillance operations in this region, learning every ridge, every game trail, every vantage point that could conceal a sniper or provide cover for an ambush. Her expertise had earned her a reputation among the special operations community as one of the most reliable Overwatch snipers in theater. Through her scope, Maria scanned the tree methodically, looking for any sign of movement or disturbance. The forest appeared peaceful, almost serene, but she knew better than to trust appearances. Years of combat experience had taught her that the quietest moments often preceded the deadliest encounters. Birds chirped occasionally in the distance, and a light breeze rustled the pine branches, but everything seemed normal. Too normal, perhaps. Her radio crackled softly with the voice of Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, the SEAL team leader. Overwatch, this is Neptune 6. We are 15 minutes from insertion point Alpha. Confirm your status and sector coverage. Maria keyed her radio twice in response, the agreed-upon signal that meant all clear. She continued her methodical scan of the surrounding area, paying particular attention to the ridgelines and elevated positions where enemy snipers might establish firing positions. The compound they were targeting sat in a natural depression surrounded by hills, making it an ideal location for defenders to establish interlocking fields of fire. The mission had been planned for weeks. Intelligence officers had identified Abdul Rahman al-Masri as a key facilitator moving weapons and fighters across the Pakistan border. His capture or elimination would significantly disrupt Taliban operations in the region. The compound where he was believed to be hiding had been under surveillance for days, with drone footage confirming the presence of multiple armed guards and defensive positions. SEAL Team 7 consisted of 8 highly trained operators, each with specialized skills that made them ideal for this type of direct action mission. Lieutenant Commander Morrison was a veteran of dozens of similar operations, known for his calm decision-making under pressure and his ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. His team included explosive ordnance specialists, communications experts, medics, and assault specialists, all cross-trained in multiple disciplines. Maria had worked with Morrison's team on several previous operations, and she had developed a deep respect for their professionalism and tactical competence. They trusted her judgment and relied on her Overwatch capabilities to identify threats and provide covering fire when needed. This mutual trust had been forged through shared experiences in some of the most dangerous areas of Afghanistan. As she continued her surveillance, Maria noticed movement in a cluster of rocks approximately 800 meters to her northeast. She adjusted her scope and focused on the area, watching patiently for additional signs of activity. After several minutes, she caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a rifle barrel reflecting sunlight. Her pulse quickened slightly, but her breathing remained controlled. She keyed her radio. Neptune 6, Overwatch. Possible sniper position, 800 meters northeast of your insertion point. Single target, elevated position behind rock formation. Morrison's voice came back immediately. Copy, Overwatch. Can you neutralize? Maria studied the position carefully through her scope. The target was well concealed, but She had a clear shot if he exposed himself again. Affirmative, Neptune 6. I have a clear line of sight. Waiting for target exposure. The SEAL team was now moving through the forest toward their objective, using natural cover and concealment to avoid detection. Maria divided her attention between monitoring their progress and keeping watch on the suspected sniper position. The enemy fighter was disciplined, moving only occasionally and exposing minimal portions of his body. Through her earpiece, she could hear the quiet communications between team members as they navigated the difficult terrain. They were making good time despite the challenging conditions, staying on schedule for their planned assault on the compound. The operation was timed to coincide with morning prayers, when intelligence suggested the target would be most likely to be present and least alert to incoming threats. Suddenly, Maria detected movement in multiple positions around the forest. Her blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. The SEAL team was walking into a carefully planned ambush. Enemy fighters had positioned themselves in concealed locations throughout the valley, creating overlapping fields of fire that would trap the Americans in a deadly crossfire. She immediately keyed her radio. Neptune 6, this is Overwatch. Abort mission immediately. You are walking into a complex ambush. Multiple enemy positions, at least 6 confirmed hostiles in prepared positions. Morrison's voice remained calm despite the urgency of the situation. Copy, Overwatch. Can you identify specific threats? Maria was already shifting her aim to different targets, trying to assess the full scope of the ambush. Confirmed sniper northeast of your position, machine gun team approximately 400 meters to your east, and what appears to be an RPG team position on the ridgeline south of the compound. Additional movement detected in at least 3 other locations. The SEAL team immediately went to ground, taking cover behind fallen logs and rock formations while they assessed their situation. They were caught in the open with limited cover, exactly where the enemy had planned to trap them. The forest that had seemed so peaceful just moments before had transformed into a deadly maze of hidden threats. Maria knew that the success of the mission and the lives of 8 elite soldiers now depended largely on her ability to neutralize key threats before the ambush could be sprung. She had trained for moments like this, spending countless hours on shooting ranges and in combat situations, perfecting her marksmanship skills and learning to operate effectively under extreme pressure. Through her scope, she could see that the enemy fighters were well-disciplined and patient. They were waiting for the SEAL team to move deeper into the kill zone before initiating contact. This suggested a level of tactical sophistication that was concerning. These were not amateur fighters, but experienced combatants who understood how to plan and execute complex military operations. The terrain worked both for and against Maria's Overwatch position. While she had excellent visibility over much of the valley, the dense forest canopy and rocky terrain provided numerous hiding places for enemy fighters. She would need to be extremely precise in identifying and engaging targets while avoiding giving away her own position. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece again. Overwatch, we need immediate suppression of that machine gun position to the east. We're going to try to move to better cover, but we need that crew neutralized first. Maria had already identified the machine gun team and was calculating the range and environmental factors that would affect her shot. The distance was approximately 600 meters, with a slight crosswind from the west. She adjusted her scope accordingly and controlled her breathing as she prepared to engage. Target acquired, Neptune 6. Machine gun crew, 600 meters. Engaging now. The enemy machine gunner had made the mistake of exposing too much of his upper body while preparing his weapon for firing. Maria centered her crosshairs on his chest and squeezed the trigger with steady pressure. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and through her scope, she watched the target collapse behind his weapon. The sound of her shot echoed through the valley, immediately alerting all enemy positions to the presence of an American sniper. She knew that her position would now become a priority target for enemy forces, but her primary concern remained providing cover for the SEAL team's movement to safety. Target down, she reported. Machine gun neutralized. Be advised, my position is now compromised. Almost immediately, rifle fire began impacting the rocks around her position. The enemy had quickly identified the general area from which her shot had originated and were attempting to suppress her with concentrated fire. Maria remained calm, using the natural protection of the rocky outcrop to shield herself while continuing to observe the battlefield. The SEAL team was now moving quickly toward better cover, but they were still exposed to fire from multiple directions. Maria could see muzzle flashes from at least 4 different positions as enemy fighters began engaging the Americans. The careful ambush plan was falling apart due to her intervention, but the threat was far from over. She identified another immediate threat, an RPG team positioned on a ridgeline with a clear shot at the SEAL team's current location. The enemy fighters were setting up their weapon system and would soon have the ability to deliver devastating fire against the Americans. This target had to be neutralized immediately. Maria shifted her aim to the RPG team, calculating the increased range of approximately 900 meters. At this distance, environmental factors became much more critical, and she needed to account for bullet drop, wind drift, and the movement of her targets. She took a deep breath and focused on her fundamentals: sight picture, breathing, trigger control. The RPG gunner was kneeling behind his weapon, with his assistant positioned nearby with additional rockets. Maria chose to engage the gunner first, as he posed the most immediate threat to the SEAL team. She aligned her crosshairs carefully and squeezed the trigger smoothly. The shot was perfect. The enemy fighter dropped immediately, and his assistant began frantically trying to take over operation of the weapon system. Maria worked the bolt on her rifle and engaged the second target before he could bring the RPG to bear on the Americans. RPG threat neutralized, she reported. 2 targets down on the south ridgeline. But the situation was deteriorating rapidly. More enemy fighters were appearing from concealed positions throughout the forest, and Maria realized that the SEAL team had stumbled into something much larger than anticipated. This was not just a simple ambush, but a major enemy operation involving dozens of fighters positioned throughout the valley. Through her scope, she could see additional muzzle flashes from positions she had not previously identified. The enemy had clearly spent significant time and resources preparing this trap, and they had been waiting for exactly this type of American operation. Intelligence had failed to detect the true scope of the threat, and now 8 of America's elite soldiers were fighting for their lives in a forest that had become a killing field. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece, strained but still controlled. Overwatch, we need immediate extraction. This is a much larger force than anticipated. Estimate 20 to 30 hostiles in prepared positions. Requesting immediate air support. Maria continued scanning for threats while monitoring the SEAL team's movement. They were fighting their way toward a more defensible position, but they were outnumbered and surrounded. The enemy had prepared this ambush carefully, positioning fighters to prevent exactly the type of withdrawal the Americans were attempting. She identified another sniper position approximately 700 meters to her west. The enemy marksman was attempting to engage the SEAL team as they moved through the forest. Maria could see the muzzle flash from his rifle and quickly calculated his position. This target represented a significant threat to the Americans and needed to be eliminated immediately. The enemy sniper was well concealed behind a fallen log, exposing only his head and rifle when he fired. Maria would need to time her shot perfectly, engaging him during the brief moment when he was exposed. She positioned her crosshairs where she anticipated he would appear and waited patiently. When the enemy sniper rose to take his next shot, Maria was ready. Her rifle cracked, and the threat was eliminated before he could engage any of the Americans. But she knew that more enemy fighters were moving into position, and the situation was becoming increasingly desperate for the SEAL team. The forest that had seemed so peaceful at dawn had transformed into a battlefield where every tree, every rock, every shadow could conceal a deadly threat. Maria realized that this would be the most challenging fight of her military career, requiring every skill she had developed through years of training and combat experience. As the morning sun climbed higher over the mountains of Afghanistan, casting long shadows through the forest canopy, the battle was just beginning. 8 elite American soldiers were trapped in enemy territory, surrounded by a determined and well-prepared adversary. Their survival would depend on their training, their courage, and the precise marksmanship of one female sniper positioned on a rocky outcrop overlooking the Valley of Death below. The crack of enemy rifle fire echoed through the valley as Maria Santos worked her bolt action and chambered another round. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool mountain air. Below in the forest, SEAL Team 7 was pinned down behind a cluster of boulders, taking fire from at least 6 different positions. The ambush had been meticulously planned, with enemy fighters positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that turned the peaceful valley into a death trap. Through her scope, Maria could see Lieutenant Commander Morrison gesturing to his team members, coordinating their defensive positions while enemy bullets chipped bark from the trees around them. The SEALs were spread out in a rough defensive perimeter, each man covering a different sector while they waited for an opportunity to move to better cover. Maria's radio crackled with Morrison's voice, calm despite the intensity of the firefight. Overwatch, we need suppressive fire on the position approximately 300 meters to our north. Enemy squad with automatic weapons has us pinned down. She immediately shifted her aim to scan the area Morrison had indicated. Through the dense pine forest, she could see muzzle flashes from what appeared to be a PK machine gun position. The enemy crew had established themselves behind a natural earthen berm, giving them excellent cover while they poured fire down on the Americans. I have eyes on the target, Neptune 6. Automatic weapon crew, 300 meters north of your position. Engaging now. The machine gunner was partially exposed as he operated his weapon, but Maria would need to time her shot carefully. Machine gun crews typically operated in pairs, with a gunner and an assistant who fed ammunition and helped with target acquisition. She would need to engage both targets quickly to effectively neutralize the threat. She centered her crosshairs on the machine gunner's center mass and controlled her breathing. The distance was relatively close at 300 meters, well within her effective range. Environmental factors were minimal at this distance, but she still needed to account for the slight crosswind that had been affecting her shots throughout the morning. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as she fired. Through her scope, she watched the enemy gunner slump over his weapon. His assistant immediately tried to take over the machine gun, but Maria had anticipated this reaction. She worked the bolt smoothly and engaged the second target before he could bring the weapon back into action. Machine gun crew neutralized, she reported. 2 targets down. But even as she eliminated one threat, Maria could see that more enemy fighters were moving into position throughout the forest. This was clearly a much larger operation than anyone had anticipated. Intelligence estimates had suggested a dozen fighters at most, but she was now observing evidence of at least 30 enemy combatants positioned throughout the valley. The enemy fighters were displaying a level of tactical sophistication that was deeply concerning. They were not rushing forward in disorganized attacks, but were maintaining disciplined fire and movement, working to systematically reduce the Americans' options for escape or defensive positioning. Someone with significant military training was clearly coordinating this operation. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece again. Overwatch, we're going to attempt to move to that ridgeline approximately 200 meters to our east. Can you provide covering fire during our movement? Maria scanned the route the SEAL team would need to take to reach better cover. The terrain was challenging, with open areas that would expose them to enemy fire from multiple directions. She identified at least 3 positions from which enemy fighters could engage the Americans during their movement. Neptune 6. I can see multiple threats along your planned route. Enemy positions at your 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 6 o'clock relative to your movement direction. Recommend you wait for me to suppress these positions before beginning your movement. Copy, Overwatch. We'll wait for your signal. Maria prioritized the threats based on their ability to inflict casualties on the moving SEAL team. The most dangerous position was a sniper approximately 400 meters to the southeast who had been taking careful shots at the Americans since the firefight began. This enemy marksman was skilled and patient, waiting for clear shots rather than wasting ammunition on suppressive fire. She studied the sniper's position carefully through her scope. He was concealed behind a large pine tree, exposing only his rifle barrel and a small portion of his head when he took shots. This would be a challenging engagement requiring precise timing and exceptional marksmanship skills. Maria positioned her crosshairs where she anticipated the enemy sniper would appear when he took his next shot. She regulated her breathing and waited patiently, knowing that this engagement would require perfect execution. The lives of 8 elite soldiers depended on her ability to neutralize threats quickly and accurately. When the enemy sniper shifted position to take another shot at the SEAL team, Maria was ready. Her rifle cracked, and the threat was eliminated before he could engage any of the Americans. She immediately shifted her aim to the second priority target, an enemy fighter with an RPG who was attempting to get into position to engage the SEALs with indirect fire. The RPG gunner was moving between trees, trying to find a clear shot at the Americans while remaining concealed from Maria's overwatch position. She tracked his movement through her scope, leading him slightly as he moved between covered positions. When he paused behind a fallen log to set up his weapon, Maria had a clear shot. Her second round found its target, neutralizing the RPG threat before the enemy fighter could engage the SEAL team. But she knew that more threats were emerging throughout the forest, and the situation was becoming increasingly desperate for the Americans trapped in the valley below. 2 more threats neutralized, she reported. RPG gunner and enemy sniper eliminated. You have a clearer route now, but expect contact during movement. Morrison acknowledged her report and began coordinating his team's movement to the more defensible position on the ridgeline. The SEALs moved in pairs, with one element providing covering fire while the other advanced. Their movement was smooth and professional, demonstrating the training and experience that made them among the world's elite fighting forces. But as the SEAL team began their tactical movement, Maria observed something that made her blood run cold. Additional enemy fighters were emerging from concealed positions throughout the forest, moving to intercept the Americans before they could reach the safety of the ridgeline. This was not a random encounter, but a carefully orchestrated operation designed to trap and destroy an American special operations team. Through her scope, she could see at least a dozen enemy fighters moving through the forest in a coordinated manner. They were using hand signals and moving with the discipline of trained soldiers rather than irregular fighters. Someone with significant military experience was clearly commanding this operation. Maria realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented in her experience. A large-scale enemy operation specifically designed to ambush and destroy American special forces. The implications were staggering. If the enemy had developed this level of tactical capability and operational security, similar ambushes could be waiting for American forces throughout Afghanistan. Her radio crackled with Morrison's voice, more urgent now. Overwatch, we're taking fire from multiple directions. Enemy forces are moving to cut off our escape routes. We need immediate air support. Neptune 6, I count at least 15 enemy fighters converging on your position. This is a much larger operation than anticipated. You need to reach that ridgeline immediately. Maria began engaging targets as quickly as she could acquire them, but she was facing a fundamental problem. As a single sniper, she could only engage one target at a time, while the enemy was attacking with coordinated fire from multiple positions. Even with her exceptional marksmanship skills, she could not eliminate threats fast enough to significantly alter the tactical situation. She prioritized targets based on their immediate threat to the SEAL team, focusing on enemy fighters who were in position to inflict casualties on the Americans during their movement. Her rifle cracked repeatedly as she engaged target after target, but for each enemy fighter she eliminated, 2 more seemed to appear from concealed positions. Through her scope, she watched one of the SEALs stumble as enemy fire found its mark. The injured operator was immediately pulled to cover by his teammates, but Maria could see that the team's mobility was now severely compromised. They would need to defend their current position rather than attempting to reach the ridgeline. Neptune 6, I observe one of your team members take a hit. What is your status? Morrison's voice remained controlled despite the deteriorating situation. Overwatch, we have one man down with a leg wound. He's mobile, but compromised. We're establishing a defensive perimeter at our current location. Continue engaging targets of opportunity. Maria knew that a static defensive position would eventually be overrun by the superior numbers of enemy fighters. The SEALs needed to either reach a more defensible position or receive immediate reinforcements. Neither option seemed likely given their current circumstances. She continued engaging threats while monitoring the broader tactical situation. The enemy was demonstrating sophisticated small unit tactics, with some fighters providing suppressive fire, while others maneuvered to better positions. They were not rushing forward in disorganized attacks, but were systematically reducing the Americans' options through disciplined fire and movement. Through her earpiece, Maria could hear the SEAL team's communications as they coordinated their defense. Each man was covering a specific sector, calling out enemy movements and coordinating their limited ammunition. They were fighting with the professionalism and skill that had made them legendary, but they were facing overwhelming odds in a carefully prepared killing ground. Maria identified another priority target, an enemy fighter with what appeared to be a radio, likely the local commander coordinating the ambush. This individual was positioned approximately 500 meters to the northwest, partially concealed behind a rock formation, but exposed enough for a precision shot. She adjusted her scope for the increased range and environmental factors. Taking out the enemy commander might disrupt their coordination and provide the SEAL team with an opportunity to break contact or reach a better position. The shot would be challenging due to the distance and the target's limited exposure, but it was necessary. Maria controlled her breathing and aligned her crosshairs carefully. The enemy commander was speaking into his radio, apparently coordinating the positions of his fighters throughout the valley. When he turned slightly to gesture toward the SEAL team's position, Maria had the shot she needed. Her rifle recoiled, and, through her scope, she watched the enemy commander collapse. Almost immediately, she noticed a decrease in the coordination of enemy fire as subordinate leaders tried to take control of the operation. The elimination of the command element had created the tactical opportunity the Americans needed. Enemy commander neutralized, she reported. Their coordination appears disrupted. Now might be your opportunity to move. Morrison immediately seized the initiative. Copy, Overwatch. We're moving now. Provide covering fire on any targets that threaten our movement. The SEAL team began moving again, taking advantage of the temporary confusion among enemy forces. They moved quickly but carefully, knowing that enemy fighters were still positioned throughout the forest and could re-engage them at any moment. Maria provided covering fire, engaging any enemy fighter who attempted to target the moving Americans. But as the SEALs advanced toward the ridgeline, Maria observed something that sent a chill down her spine. More enemy fighters were arriving in the valley, reinforcing the forces already engaged with the Americans. This was not just a local ambush, but part of a larger operation involving potentially dozens of enemy combatants. Through her scope, she could see enemy fighters moving along game trails and ridgelines, all converging on the valley where the SEAL team was trapped. The scope of this operation was far beyond anything intelligence had suggested, and Maria realized that she was witnessing a major enemy offensive operation designed to inflict maximum casualties on American forces. The morning sun was climbing higher, burning off the mist and providing better visibility across the battlefield. But improved visibility worked both ways, making it easier for enemy fighters to spot and engage the Americans. Maria knew that time was running out for the SEAL team, trapped in the valley below. As she continued engaging targets and providing overwatch for the moving SEAL team, Maria made a decision that would define the rest of the operation. She would need to leave her current position and move closer to the SEAL team to provide more effective support. Her elevated position provided excellent visibility, but the ranges were becoming too great for precise engagement of all threats. The decision to abandon her overwatch position was dangerous and against standard sniper doctrine, but the tactical situation demanded desperate measures. 8 elite American soldiers were fighting for their lives in a carefully prepared enemy killing ground, and their survival might depend on her willingness to take extraordinary risks to support them. Maria began preparing to displace from her position, gathering her equipment while continuing to monitor the tactical situation through her scope. The battle was entering a new phase, one that would test every skill she had developed through years of training and combat experience. The forest had become a deadly maze where every decision could mean the difference between life and death for America's elite warriors. Maria Santos made the decision that would change everything. She could no longer provide effective overwatch from her elevated position as the enemy forces spread throughout the valley, creating threats at ranges that challenged even her exceptional marksmanship skills. The SEAL team needed closer support, and that meant abandoning the safety of her concealed sniper position to move directly into the battlefield. She gathered her equipment quickly, but methodically, ensuring that nothing was left behind that could compromise future operations. Her M24 rifle, additional ammunition, radio equipment, and survival gear were secured in under 3 minutes. Before leaving her position, she took one final scan of the valley through her scope, identifying the most immediate threats to guide her movement and positioning. The terrain between her current position and the SEAL team's location was treacherous, offering limited cover and multiple opportunities for enemy observation. Maria would need to move approximately 800 meters through hostile territory while avoiding detection by enemy fighters who were actively hunting for American forces throughout the forest. She keyed her radio one last time from her original position. Neptune 6, this is Overwatch. I am displacing to provide closer support. Estimate 15 minutes to reach a position where I can provide more effective covering fire. Morrison's voice crackled back immediately, strained from the ongoing firefight. Copy, Overwatch. Be advised, enemy forces are moving to surround our position. We count at least 20 hostiles in coordinated movement. Your current fire support has been the only thing keeping us alive. Understood, Neptune 6. Maintain your position and continue defensive operations. I will re-establish Overwatch from a closer position and continue engaging priority targets. Maria began her descent from the rocky outcrop, moving carefully to avoid creating noise or movement that might betray her position to enemy observers. The forest floor was covered with pine needles and fallen branches that could snap under her weight and alert nearby enemy fighters to her presence. Each step was calculated and deliberate. As she moved through the forest, Maria could hear the ongoing firefight in the valley below. The distinctive crack of American M4 carbines mixed with the heavier reports of AK-47s and machine guns as the battle continued. Occasionally, the sharp explosion of a grenade punctuated the small arms fire, indicating that the engagement was intensifying. Through breaks in the tree canopy, Maria caught glimpses of muzzle flashes from various positions throughout the valley. The enemy had clearly committed significant resources to this operation, with fighters positioned on multiple ridgelines and in concealed positions throughout the forest floor. This level of coordination suggested months of planning and preparation. 20 minutes into her movement, Maria encountered her first direct threat. An enemy fighter was moving along a game trail approximately 50 meters ahead of her position, apparently attempting to flank the SEAL team from the north. He was armed with an AK-47 and moving with the confidence of someone who believed he controlled the battlefield. Maria immediately took cover behind a large pine tree and assessed the situation. The enemy fighter had not detected her presence, but his current path would bring him within 20 meters of her position. She could engage him with her sidearm, but gunfire would alert other enemy forces to her location and compromise her movement to support the SEAL team. Instead, Maria chose a different approach. She set her rifle down carefully and drew her combat knife, a 7-inch blade that had been her constant companion through dozens of combat operations. The enemy fighter was moving predictably along the trail, focused on the sounds of the firefight ahead rather than potential threats to his flanks. Maria timed her movement perfectly, emerging from concealment just as the enemy fighter passed her position. Her attack was swift and silent, neutralizing the threat without alerting other enemy forces to her presence. She quickly searched the body, recovering additional 7.62 mm ammunition that could be useful if she encountered enemy weapons during the operation. Continuing her movement toward the SEAL team's position, Maria began to understand the true scope of the enemy operation. Through the trees, she could see evidence of prepared fighting positions, weapons caches, and communication equipment. This was not a hasty ambush, but a carefully planned operation that had been weeks or months in preparation. The enemy had chosen their battlefield carefully, selecting terrain that favored defenders and channeled any American forces into predetermined killing zones. The valley where the SEAL team was trapped had been deliberately prepared as a killing ground, with obstacles and barriers that would prevent rapid escape, while providing excellent firing positions for the defenders. As Maria approached the sound of the ongoing firefight, she could hear individual conversations between SEAL team members as they coordinated their defense. Their ammunition was running low, and the wounded team member was becoming a significant factor in their ability to maneuver. Time was running out for the Americans trapped in the enemy killing zone. She identified a position approximately 300 meters from the SEAL team's defensive perimeter that would provide excellent fields of fire against the enemy forces threatening the Americans. The position was a natural depression surrounded by large boulders, offering both concealment and protection from enemy fire while providing clear sight lines to multiple target areas. Maria established herself in the new position and immediately began engaging targets that posed the most immediate threat to the SEAL team. From her closer position, she could see details of the enemy operation that had not been visible from her original Overwatch location. The enemy fighters were wearing matching equipment and using similar tactics, suggesting they were part of a formal military organization rather than irregular fighters. Through her scope, she identified an enemy mortar team that was setting up their weapon approximately 400 meters to the east. The mortar represented a significant threat to the SEAL team's position, as indirect fire could neutralize their cover and force them into the open where they could be engaged by enemy small arms fire. Maria adjusted her scope and prepared to engage the mortar team before they could bring their weapon into action. The crew consisted of 3 fighters, a gunner, an assistant gunner, and an ammunition bearer. She would need to engage all 3 targets quickly to prevent the mortar from being employed against the Americans. Her first shot eliminated the gunner just as he was preparing to drop the first round into the mortar tube. The assistant gunner immediately tried to take over the weapon, but Maria's second shot neutralized him before he could continue the fire mission. The ammunition bearer attempted to flee, but Maria's third shot ended that threat as well. Mortar team neutralized, she reported over the radio. 3 targets eliminated, indirect fire threat removed. Morrison's voice came back with obvious relief. Outstanding work, Overwatch. That mortar would have finished us. We can see your new position and have adjusted our fire sectors accordingly. From her new position, Maria could provide much more effective support to the embattled SEAL team. She began systematically engaging enemy fighters who were attempting to advance on the Americans' position, using her precision rifle fire to disrupt enemy movement and coordination. Each shot was carefully aimed and accounted for, as she had limited ammunition and needed to make every round count. The enemy forces were becoming increasingly frustrated with their inability to overrun the small American force. Maria could see them attempting to coordinate attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, but her precision fire was disrupting their movement and eliminating key personnel before they could execute their plans. Through her scope, she observed what appeared to be a senior enemy commander attempting to rally his forces for a coordinated assault on the SEAL team's position. The commander was positioned approximately 500 meters to the south, using hand signals and radio communications to coordinate his fighters' movements. Maria realized that eliminating this commander could significantly disrupt the enemy operation and provide the SEAL team with an opportunity to either escape or establish a more defensible position. The shot would be challenging due to the range and the target's limited exposure, but it represented the best opportunity to alter the tactical situation in favor of the Americans. She adjusted her scope for the increased range and environmental factors, taking into account the slight crosswind that had been affecting her shots throughout the operation. The enemy commander was partially concealed behind a tree, exposing only his head and shoulders as he directed his fighters' movements. Maria controlled her breathing and aligned her crosshairs carefully. This shot could determine the outcome of the entire operation, and she needed to execute it perfectly. When the enemy commander stepped slightly to his left to get a better view of the battlefield, Maria had the clear shot she needed. Her rifle cracked, and through her scope, she watched the enemy commander collapse. The effect on enemy operations was immediate and dramatic. Without their senior leaders' coordination, the various enemy elements began operating independently, losing the tactical coordination that had made them so dangerous. Enemy commander eliminated, she reported. Observing significant disruption in enemy coordination and movement, Morrison immediately seized the opportunity created by the enemy's confusion. Copy, Overwatch. We're going to attempt to break contact and move to a more defensible position while they're disorganized. Continue engaging targets of opportunity. The SEAL team began their tactical movement, using the temporary lull in coordinated enemy fire to advance toward better cover. Maria provided covering fire, engaging any enemy fighter who attempted to target the moving Americans. Her precision rifle fire was having a significant psychological effect on the enemy forces, as they were unable to expose themselves without risking immediate engagement by the American sniper. But as the SEAL team moved through the forest, Maria observed a new threat emerging. Additional enemy reinforcements were arriving in the valley, including what appeared to be a heavy weapons team with a recoilless rifle. This weapon system could penetrate any cover the Americans might find and represented a serious escalation in the enemy's capabilities. The recoilless rifle team was setting up their weapon approximately 600 meters to the northeast, positioning it to engage the SEAL team's anticipated route of movement. Maria realized that this weapon system had to be neutralized immediately or it would prevent any American movement within a valley. She shifted her aim to the heavy weapons team and began calculating the range and environmental factors that would affect her shots. At 600 meters, she would need to account for significant bullet drop and wind drift. The targets were also moving as they set up their weapon, making precise engagement even more challenging. Maria decided to engage the weapon system itself rather than the crew members, hoping to disable the recoilless rifle before it could be employed against the SEAL team. She aimed for the weapon's sight system, knowing that damaging the optics would render the weapon ineffective even if the crew remained intact. Her shot was perfect, striking the recoilless rifle's sight assembly and rendering the weapon system inoperable. The crew members immediately began attempting to repair the damage, but Maria's follow-up shots eliminated them before they could restore the weapon to operational status. Heavy weapons team neutralized, she reported. Recoilless rifle disabled, crew eliminated. The tactical situation was slowly improving for the Americans, but Maria knew that time was not on their side. The enemy clearly had additional resources available and was likely calling for reinforcements to deal with the unexpected resistance from the small American force. The SEAL team needed to either escape the valley immediately or prepare for an extended siege. Through her scope, Maria could see that the SEAL team had reached a more defensible position on a small ridgeline that provided better cover and fields of fire. They were establishing a perimeter defense and treating their wounded team member, who appeared to be stable despite his injuries. But even as the immediate tactical situation improved, Maria realized that the broader strategic picture remained dire. The enemy had demonstrated capabilities and coordination that suggested a significant threat to American operations throughout the region. The intelligence failure that had led to this ambush indicated serious problems with coalition understanding of enemy capabilities and intentions. As the morning sun climbed higher over the mountains of Afghanistan, casting harsh shadows through the forest canopy, Maria prepared for what she knew would be the most challenging phase of the operation. The enemy would not simply abandon their carefully planned ambush, and reinforcements would likely arrive soon to continue the assault on the trapped Americans. The battle had reached a critical juncture where the next few hours would determine whether 8 of America's elite warriors would survive to return home or become casualties in a remote valley that most Americans would never know existed. The situation was reaching a critical point as Maria Santos observed enemy reinforcements arriving in the valley. Through her scope, she counted at least 15 additional fighters moving along the ridgelines, all carrying modern weapons and equipment that suggested they were part of a well-funded and organized military force. The scope of this operation was far beyond anything intelligence had predicted. From her position 300 meters from the SEAL team's defensive perimeter, Maria could see that Lieutenant Commander Morrison had established an excellent defensive position on the rocky ridgeline. The SEALs had created interlocking fields of fire that would make any direct assault costly for the enemy forces. However, their ammunition situation was becoming critical, and the wounded team member required medical attention that could not be provided under combat conditions. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece, calm but urgent. "Overwatch. We have enemy forces massing for what appears to be a coordinated assault from multiple directions. Our ammunition is running low, and we need immediate extraction or reinforcement." Maria scanned the surrounding terrain, identifying at least 4 separate groups of enemy fighters positioning themselves for simultaneous attacks on the SEAL team's position. The enemy commander who had replaced the one she had eliminated was clearly learning from his predecessor's mistakes, coordinating a more careful and systematic assault. Neptune 6. I count approximately 40 hostiles in 4 separate assault groups. They appear to be preparing for coordinated attacks from your north, east, south, and west positions. This is beyond our current capability to repel without immediate support. Through her radio, Maria could hear Morrison coordinating with higher headquarters, requesting immediate air support and extraction for his team. But she knew that close air support would take time to arrive, and helicopter extraction would be impossible under the current enemy fire. The SEAL team would need to survive on their own for at least another hour before help could arrive. Maria made another tactical decision that defied conventional sniper doctrine. Rather than maintaining her Overwatch position and engaging targets at range, she would move even closer to the SEAL team's position and provide direct fire support from within their defensive perimeter. This would violate every principle of sniper employment, but the tactical situation demanded extraordinary measures. She gathered her equipment and began moving toward the SEAL team's position, using natural cover and concealment to avoid detection by the enemy forces that were now positioned throughout the valley. The movement was dangerous, as enemy fighters had established observation posts that could detect any American movement in the area. As Maria approached the SEAL team's defensive position, she encountered an enemy patrol that was attempting to infiltrate the Americans' perimeter from the west. 3 fighters were moving carefully through the forest, using hand signals and maintaining noise discipline as they approached what they believed was an undefended flank of the American position. Maria immediately took cover behind a fallen log and assessed the threat. The enemy patrol was well-trained and disciplined, moving with the tactical proficiency that she had observed throughout the operation. They were approximately 40 meters from her position and had not yet detected her presence. Rather than engaging with her rifle, which would alert other enemy forces to her location, Maria decided to eliminate the patrol using more direct methods. She secured her rifle and drew her sidearm, a 9mm pistol that would be more suitable for close-quarters combat. The engagement would need to be swift and decisive to prevent any of the enemy fighters from alerting their comrades. Maria moved carefully through the forest, using the natural terrain to approach the enemy patrol from their blind spot. Her years of combat experience had taught her how to move silently through various types of terrain, and the soft pine needle floor of the forest helped muffle any sound from her movement. When she was within 15 meters of the enemy patrol, Maria struck with the speed and precision that had made her legendary among Special Operations Forces. Her first shot eliminated the lead fighter before he could react. The second and third fighters turned toward the sound of gunfire, but Maria's training and experience gave her a decisive advantage in the close-quarters engagement. Within seconds, all three enemy fighters had been neutralized, and Maria had prevented a potentially catastrophic infiltration of the SEAL team's defensive perimeter. She quickly searched the bodies, recovering additional ammunition and intelligence materials that might prove valuable for understanding the scope of the enemy operation. Moving quickly toward the SEAL team's position, Maria could hear the sound of incoming mortar rounds impacting around the Americans' defensive perimeter. The enemy had brought additional indirect fire assets into the operation, escalating the threat level significantly. The SEAL team was now facing coordinated direct and indirect fire from a numerically superior enemy force. Maria reached the SEAL team's perimeter just as the first coordinated assault began. Enemy fighters were advancing from multiple directions simultaneously, using covering fire and tactical movement to close with the American position. The SEALs were fighting magnificently, but they were clearly outgunned and outnumbered. She immediately integrated into the defensive position, taking responsibility for the western sector where she had eliminated the enemy patrol. From her position within the perimeter, Maria could see the full scope of the enemy assault and coordinate her fire with the other defenders. Overwatch in position, she announced over the team radio. I have the west sector covered and eliminated an enemy infiltration patrol. Morrison acknowledged her arrival while continuing to coordinate the team's defense. Copy, Overwatch. Outstanding work. We need your precision fire on priority targets. Enemy assault teams are closing from multiple directions. Maria immediately began engaging enemy fighters who posed the most immediate threat to the defensive position. Her precision rifle fire was having a significant impact on enemy morale and coordination as their assault teams were losing key personnel before they could close with the American position. Through her scope, she identified the enemy assault leader who was coordinating the attack from a position approximately 200 meters to the north. This individual was using radio communications to coordinate the various assault teams and represented a high-value target that could disrupt the entire enemy operation if eliminated. Maria adjusted her scope for the reduced range and engaged the target with a single, precise shot. The enemy assault leader collapsed, and she immediately observed confusion among the attacking forces as subordinate leaders attempted to maintain coordination without their primary commander. The elimination of the assault leader created an opportunity for the SEAL team to take the initiative. Morrison immediately ordered concentrated fire on the most threatening enemy assault team, and the Americans' disciplined marksmanship began to take a significant toll on the attacking forces. But even as one assault was repelled, Maria could see that additional enemy forces were moving into position for follow-up attacks. The enemy clearly had significant resources committed to this operation and was prepared to accept heavy casualties to eliminate the American Special Operations team. Through her earpiece, Maria heard the distinctive sound of approaching helicopters. Air support was finally arriving, but she knew that the enemy would make a desperate final assault before the aircraft could effectively engage. The next few minutes would be the most critical of the entire operation. Morrison's voice came over the radio with obvious relief. All stations, this is Neptune 6. Air support is 2 minutes out. Maintain defensive positions and prepare to mark enemy targets with smoke. Maria could see enemy fighters throughout the valley beginning to withdraw toward concealed positions, attempting to avoid the incoming airstrike. But she also observed a group of approximately 10 fighters who were continuing their assault on the SEAL team's position, apparently determined to overrun the Americans before air support could intervene. She focused her fire on this final assault group, engaging targets with rapid precision to disrupt their advance. Her rifle cracked repeatedly as she eliminated enemy fighters who were attempting to close with a defensive position. The SEAL team's coordinated fire was devastating, but the enemy fighters continued their assault with remarkable determination. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder as two H-64 Apache attack helicopters appeared over the ridgeline. Their 30mm cannons immediately began engaging enemy positions throughout the valley, and the distinctive sound of Hellfire missiles added to the destruction being visited upon the enemy forces. Within minutes, the enemy assault had been completely disrupted. Those fighters who survived the air attack were withdrawing rapidly through the forest, abandoning their equipment, and wounded comrades in their haste to escape the devastating fire from the attack helicopters. Morrison's voice crackled over the radio as he coordinated with the helicopter pilots. "Gunship 1, this is Neptune 6. Excellent work. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We have one wounded and are ready for extraction." The extraction helicopter, a CH-47 Chinook, appeared over the valley and began its approach to the SEAL team's position. The Apache helicopters maintained overwatch, ensuring that no enemy forces could interfere with the extraction operation. As the extraction helicopter settled into the small clearing near the SEAL team's position, Maria helped load the wounded SEAL operator onto the aircraft. Despite his leg wound, the operator was conscious and alert and would make a full recovery with proper medical treatment. The entire SEAL team boarded the helicopter quickly and efficiently, maintaining security until the aircraft was airborne and clear of the valley. Maria was the last person to board, taking a final look at the battlefield where she had spent the most intense morning of her military career. As the helicopter climbed above the mountains of Afghanistan, Maria reflected on the operation and its implications. The enemy had demonstrated capabilities and coordination that suggested a significant evolution in their tactical abilities. The intelligence failure that had led to the ambush indicated serious problems that would need to be addressed to prevent similar incidents in the future. Through the helicopter's window, Maria could see the valley where the battle had taken place, now quiet except for the occasional explosion as ordnance disposal teams destroyed abandoned enemy equipment. The forest had returned to its peaceful appearance, giving no indication of the life-death struggle that had occurred among its trees. Lieutenant Commander Morrison appeared beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Outstanding work today, Sergeant Santos. Your marksmanship and tactical decisions saved 8 lives. We would not have survived without your support." Maria nodded, still processing the events of the morning. She had fired over 30 precision shots, eliminated more than 20 enemy fighters, and made tactical decisions that had directly influenced the outcome of the operation. It had been the most challenging combat experience of her career, requiring every skill she had developed through years of training and previous combat deployments. As the helicopter flew toward the forward operating base where the team would be debriefed, Maria began planning the after-action report that would be crucial for understanding the enemy's new capabilities and preventing similar ambushes in the future. The operation had been a tactical success, but it had revealed strategic challenges that would require significant attention from senior military leaders. The forest ambush had tested every member of SEAL Team 7 and their supporting sniper to their limits. Through exceptional marksmanship, tactical decision-making, and the courage to abandon standard procedures when the situation demanded it, they had survived an encounter that could have resulted in the loss of an entire American Special Operations team. The sun was now high over the mountains of Afghanistan, burning away the last traces of the morning mist that had concealed the beginning of one of the most intense firefights in recent Special Operations history. Maria Santos had proven once again that individual skill, courage, and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds when applied at the critical moment in combat operations. The mission was complete, but its lessons would influence American special operations tactics and intelligence procedures for years to come. In a remote valley that most people would never know existed, 8 elite American soldiers and One exceptional sniper had written another chapter in the long history of courage and sacrifice that defined their profession.